We're starting a new series, and we're going to be looking at the Beatitudes and going through those over the next 7 weeks. And we're calling the series Blessed, because if you know the Beatitudes, they're all about being blessed. But you don't have to be in this world for very long to understand that the word blessed gets used in so many different ways, right? It's used in so many different manners and actions. And you can even think about the times when you're on social media and stuff, and then you see people putting hashtag blessed. It's always like in relation to being on like a white beach, right? With a cocktail, or even if you've got a family, getting all your kids together and all of them smiling in one picture, right? Like just hashtag blessed. But there's this whole thing about what it means to be blessed, about promotions or finances, the new car, the job at work, the gifts we get at Christmas. There's all these things that we want to talk about as about being blessed. And when we talk about that, what we're normally talking about is having our stomachs full, our banks full, and people looking at us with a little tinge of jealousy on the life that we are living, right? That's how we understand the word blessed to be. Our world has a scoreboard, and we all know how it works. It is about that full bank account, the full diary, being in full control, having a full life. We feel blessed when we are admired by others. When everybody else looks at us and goes, he's got it going on. Isn't that good news? Or we feel blessed when we have the right amount of Instagram likes or followers on TikTok. I know some of you older people are like, what's TikTok? It's the kids are into it, it's all right. But like we do. How many people said hello to us at church? How many people noticed that I wasn't there? We want our word blessings and blessed to be about success, more money, more opportunity, more confidence, more comfort, more abounding stuff in our lives. But there's this guy, you may have heard of him, his name's Jesus. And he sits down in the book of Matthew. He is about to preach the Sermon on the Mount, one of his most famous teachings. And as he sits down, the people that come around him are his disciples. None of them are particularly well-to-do. None of them are getting followers in the way we would want on Instagram. None of them are blessed, as we would say it. And then the crowd around him, they're not just anybody, right? These guys that are following him, this big crowd that comes around him at the Sermon on the Mount, they are the people who you wouldn't think were blessed. See, they've been hearing about this Jesus fella. They've been hearing about how he can do miracles. They've been hearing about how he can help people. And so what it actually did is it didn't get the fancy people out of the palace. It got the poor people, the broken people, the sick people to try and lay at the feet of Jesus and say, help me. And so 2,000 years ago, Jesus sits down, which, by the way, when it says that in the scriptures is really important because teachers in the rabbinical age would sit down to teach. And so when he's sitting down, he's taken a position of authoritative teaching. And so he does that surrounded by not who we would call blessed, but by who we would call broken. And he says this. Seeing the crowds, he went up on the mountain, and when he sat down, his disciples came to him. And then he opened his mouth and taught them, saying, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of God, the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. Blessed are those pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when others revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven, for so they persecuted the prophets who were before you. And may the Lord add the blessing to the reading of his word. It's this incredible scene, this upside down kingdom. Jesus announced that the ones who are blessed are not the ones that we would consider to be blessed, while surrounded by those who we wouldn't consider to be blessed. I wonder if you could understand how radical this is. It goes against our very own human nature. And I really want to put it to you today that the Beatitudes are not just slogans for you to have on a magnet that you can put on your fridge. They're not just happy little slogans that we can stick on our mugs, blessed are the poor in spirit. They're not them. They are also not a ladder that we climb and ascend to reach God. Jesus is not saying to you today to master spiritual poverty so that you can turn up in heaven. He's not saying to you, hey, if you can get past a little bit sad and get into full-blown mourning, you might actually get something out of this. He's not asking you to turn your gratitude into fake meekness. He's not asking you to eventually work hard enough so you become pure in heart so you can receive something. It is not a ladder for us to climb. And they're not personality types either, which a lot of Christians seem to do. They seem to assign timidity, that's meekness. That's not the same thing. My friend, he's really introverted. That must mean he's meek. That's not what it is. It's different. They're not a personality test for us. They're not describing what some people are. Jesus is describing the shape of the kingdom person. He's describing what it looks like to be somebody in the kingdom. He turns the world's scoreboard upside down. He is showing us what a genuinely good life actually looks like when we understand the kingdom of heaven and we understand the nature of spiritual scoreboards. Does that make sense? He is highlighting to us something very different. And so today we start with blessed are the poor in spirit. And Jesus begins in this place. Is where he starts it. He starts it, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And it's a weird and radical place to start, right? Why would you start here, Jesus? He does not begin with the powerful, the impressive, the successful, or the confident. He begins with those who recognize that before God, they are bankrupt. He begins with those who surround him, not those in palaces or those who are his disciples. He starts with those. And the reality is, honesty opens up the door for us. See, the word that Jesus uses for poor here is not describing just somebody who's slightly short of things. I don't like to dive into the Greek necessarily on a Sunday, but if you want to look into it, there's a couple of different words for Greek, but the Greek word he uses for poor here doesn't mean somebody who's struggling to pay the electric bill, right? It means somebody who cannot do anything by themselves. It means that somebody who's so poor that they solely rely on the charity of somebody else walking past them and throwing some grains on the floor. They have no house, they have nothing. It is somebody who is completely broken. And Jesus deliberately starts his whole thing with blessed are those who are bankrupt spiritually, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. What? What do you mean, Jesus? What do you mean it's not going to the people who pray hardest or tithe hardest, who turn up most, who look best, who still wear shirts and ties on Sundays? What do you mean it's not going to those people? Jesus starts with the opposite. He starts with the opposite of what we think is okay. When we say, hey, I'm good enough, I'm strong enough, I've made it, I'm doing all the right things. Jesus says, no, the kingdom of heaven is theirs for who are bankrupt spiritually and have the honesty, which is really important because we're going to get to that in a bit, the honesty to admit that they're bankrupt before God. Self-deception will keep you from living this. If you think that you're good enough, you are robbing yourself from the kingdom of heaven. Being poor in spirit is not weakness for weakness' sake. It is the courage to tell the truth about our humility, our position, our spiritual bank balance before God. We can receive only what Jesus gives when we have empty hands. Blessed are the people who know they have not good enough. Blessed are those who have stopped pretending they're spiritually rich. Blessed are those who come to God with empty hands. This whole series that we're looking throughout the Beatitudes has a deliberate plan in it. The first 4 Beatitudes take us inwardly before God. Empty hands are honest grief, a surrendered strength, and a holy hunger for things to be made right. And then the second half, the final 3 weeks, look at the rest and turns outward. What does it look like with God making us have an overflow of mercy, of purity of heart, and the cost of being a peacemaker? But everything begins here. It all starts from this place. It doesn't start at the top. It starts at the very bottom. That we must be a people with empty hands and an honest admission before God. You cannot receive comfort until you admit that you have grief. You cannot surrender your strength while pretending to be able to do it entirely by yourself. You cannot hunger for righteousness until you admit that you have been feeding your life on false things that have not filled you. You cannot give mercy until you've received mercy. You cannot become pure in heart whilst hiding in your sin from God. You cannot carry God's peace into the wars of the world if you are still at war with God himself. You cannot receive from Jesus if your hands are full with self-righteousness. Everything begins with spiritual poverty. Everything begins with empty hands before God. Poor in spirit is not self-hatred. It's not fake humility, and it's not worthlessness. Our value is a separate issue. Our value theologically is wrapped in the fact that we are made in the imago Dei. We are created in the image of God. This is not about value. This is spiritual currency. Jesus is not saying, blessed are those who despise themselves. He's not asking us to deny all the good things that he has done in our lives. He's also not asking you to pretend that you are useless. And we all know that person who's falsely humble, right? Who goes out their way to say, it's not me, but while checking that everybody knows that it was them. We all know them sort of people. And this isn't that. This spiritual empty-handedness isn't I try, God. I try and put some effort in, but really it's just you. Did you see me do that thing? Right? That's not what it is. It's not falseness. It's a spiritual honesty that means standing before God without any bargaining chips, religious trophies, excuses, or comparisons. It is saying, Lord, I have nothing except in you. It is saying, Lord, without you, I cannot save myself. I am not clean by myself. Only you can make me clean, Lord. I cannot perform my way into your kingdom. I need mercy. Poor in spirit is not worthlessness. It is coming to God with nothing to prove and nothing to hide. And when we face God, we have this habit of treating it like a job interview, right? Like when you go to a job interview and they sort of go, hey, what's your biggest weakness? I'm just too honest, right? Do you know what? I care too much about perfection. It's a bit annoying for some people sometimes. Do you know what I mean? Like we've all been in these job interviews. Maybe some of you are conducting them with people. Do you know what's your biggest weakness? I try too hard to succeed at work. Like, it's just nonsense. But we do it because the idea of a job interview is that we perform well enough that we get offered the job. The whole thing is about our performance. Do we look good enough? However, when you go to the A&E department, right, and they come up to you and they say what's wrong and you're numbing your arm and your chest is hurting, you don't turn around and go, do you know what? Sometimes I just think I'm a bit too healthy. I just take too many vitamins. You say my chest is hurting, my arm is numb, I think I'm having a heart attack, save me. Posturing doesn't help you in the accident emergency center. It just harms you and hinders you. And yet we treat coming to God more like a job interview than we do the accident emergency room. We treat him more like he's somebody to impress rather than the physician he is, who's there to heal our deepest needs. And so being poor in spirit means we get rid of all that fluff. We stop pretending that we alone are good enough, and we recognize that we are spiritually bankrupt without him stepping in. Only he is good. Only he is pure. Only he can cleanse us. The kingdom of heaven is not a job interview. You do not enter it by presenting yourself worthy. You enter it by admitting that you are broken and in need of mercy. Blessed are those who are poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And I know, like, some of you guys are like, sure, Harry, show me. Well, Jesus actually does show us. In Luke 18, he tells a parable of the tax collector and the Pharisee. And one of the things we have to be aware of today is that because we have Christian teaching in our lives, when we hear about the Pharisees, we sort of want to boo and hiss a bit. Because we know what Jesus says about them sometimes. You brood of vipers. You whitewashed tombs. We also know they're the guys that persecuted Jesus. And so we think of them as the bad guys. But that's not how the crowd Jesus is speaking to in Luke 18 would understand the Pharisees. The Pharisees are the best of the best. They're the religious elite. They're the guys that are doing this professionally. They're the guys that pray most. They tithe the best. They keep the law the best. They look immaculate. They go to church on time. They're those people. And then you have the tax collectors, which isn't just a job, right? The tax collectors to the people Jesus is speaking to, they're the scum of the earth. Because not only are they tax collecting, and who likes the tax man, right? Right, especially when he's probably a bit of a con man and they're taking a bit on top, which is what all the tax collectors were doing then. Who was he collecting taxes for? The Romans. The tax collector is not only taking your money, he's working for the very enemy that has oppressed you as a people. And so what you have is Jesus says there's a Pharisee and there's a tax collector. And we don't understand that in our eyes, but we need to understand what he's saying. Is he saying you've got somebody who's meant to be holy and then you've got the scum of the earth. And both of them go to temple. And the Pharisee prays and he says, oh Lord, look at my tithing. Isn't it wonderful? Lord, if you look at the way I've prayed to you, isn't it beautiful? I use words that nobody else could use. I use alliteration and every time I pray to make my point carry the power. He says, Lord, look at how good I've done. And then you got the tax collector. And the tax collector, he's not even coming close. He's stood way off. And he's so in a mess in his life, he doesn't even raise his eyes to heaven. This is what Luke 18 tells us. He doesn't even want to look up towards heaven. He keeps his head down. He keeps his head at the floor and he says, Lord, I am disgusting. Have mercy on me. Only you can clean me. Only you can help me. And Jesus says this thing that flips the script. He says the Pharisee goes away and receives no blessing. But he says the tax collector, he was justified. Spiritual propaganda of look how great my works are, God. Do not buy you anything. Looking the most holy buys you nothing. The only thing that gets you justified with God is spiritual honesty about our bankruptcy. Because Jesus in Luke 18 is saying, even the tax collectors can receive from me if they are honest. One man came full of his works, full of his stuff, full of everything he's done for God, and he went away empty. One man came empty, I have nothing, God, and yet left justified. And that is the shock of the first Beatitude, that the kingdom of heaven belongs to those who know they need mercy. And we know it. We know it. And not just because of Ethel, you know, we'll know how I like to pick on Ethel, but because in our own lives. That we can make ourselves look like we're doing well to everybody else in the world, but inside we are full of brokenness and mess. We know that the image that we portray to everybody isn't necessarily the truth. Man, we especially if we're British, right? You doing all right? Yeah, I'm all right. Lovely weather today, isn't it? Like we're just not open about this stuff. And trust me, I'm not saying you should suddenly start telling everybody everything. That's not healthy either, right? One of the best things one of my friends ever said to me, and this shows how old I am, they said, stop posting on Facebook so often. Like, nobody needs to know your drama. Stop being dramatic. And it was one of the best things ever, because it was just dumb. And so I'm not saying, like, when somebody goes, hey, you all right, to suddenly, like, pin them down and tell them everything that your therapist has ever told you. But that's a conversation for you, your therapist, and your close friends, right? But what I am saying is, we must recognize the issue in us where our default position is to pretend. That's our default position. We pretend it's all going all right. We pretend like it's not an issue. When we do this across the generations, right? We have our stoic and steadfast older generation who just rock up regardless. You know, they're just going to turn up and put a shift in no matter what, and they're going to make sure that everybody knows that they're still turning up. And I'm not criticizing you for turning up. What I am saying, like, you know, is it a performance or not? And then we have the millennial generation who just can't talk about our feelings. Right? That's because, hey, I'm all right. My mum just died. I'm fine. You know, it's okay. And then we have like the younger generation who are doom scrolling like mad, are having anxiety every single second, and they're still pretending like it's normal. Like, it's just our natural default position is to pretend like everything's okay. And it might be for those whose culture is not like British first, you might tell me that's a British issue, but it definitely is a British issue where we just go, yeah, it's all right. You seen the weather today? Let's talk about the weather. We actually have a joke in the team and with some friends that if they ask me a question, which sometimes they ask me questions and I'm like, well, I can't talk about that, I'll just switch to the weather, right? If I don't want to talk, I'll just go, oh, it's a bit foggy today, isn't it? And they're all like, that's come out of nowhere. And they've got it as a hint of, I don't want to talk about that. But we do that, don't we, in our lives? And I wonder if we do that with God. If when we come before God, if we come before him, we're so sure and set on making everything look good while it isn't good. I wonder if we try and go, Jesus, let's talk about the weather instead of talking about what's going on in me. But there is good news in this, really good news, because Jesus is not saying try harder. Jesus is saying come to me. There are people in this room who are genuinely just exhausted because they've done nothing but try and make it look good. They've done nothing but try and act like they have perfection, like they're trying to hold it together. And not just spiritually in the church, but also in your lives, right? You're the person that has to keep it all together in your family. You're the person that has to make sure everything's sorted out. You'll have to be the strong one. Jesus is not standing over you saying, try harder. He is saying, come to me. Some of us have followed Jesus for years, but somewhere along the way, our faith has stopped being full of life and instead become a chore. You know all the songs, you know the verses, you know the routines, you know when to stand up and sit down, but it's hollow. Jesus is not saying try harder. He is saying come to me. Others think they need to improve themselves. They need to become more talented. They need to understand things better. They need to be able to talk better, to look better, to dress better, to earn more. Jesus is not saying try harder. Jesus is saying come to me. He is not the interviewer at an interview. He is the great physician. The Gospels do not say sort yourself out and then come. The Gospel says come because you need Jesus. You cannot sort yourself out. It is the upside down kingdom. Grace belongs to those who know they need it, not those who pretend. And I think there's something powerful in that first beatitude. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Jesus doesn't say theirs might be. It could be. Maybe if the weather's right and the dice roll in the right way, the kingdom could be theirs. And it's important because in many of the other Beatitudes, it's a future promise, right? The meek will inherit the earth, right? There's many of them are future promises. Those who mourn will be comforted. Those who hunger and thirst will be filled. But this promise says, those who are poor in spirit, theirs is the kingdom of heaven. The rule of God, the mercy of God, the welcome of God, the forgiveness of God, the presence of God belong to those who know they need it. Jesus has the gift of grace for you today. But grace only fits in an empty hand. It doesn't fit in a hand full of posturing and positioning. Emptiness does not disqualify you today. It is the entry requirement to the kingdom of heaven. He became poor so that we could become rich. We find it in 2 Corinthians chapter 8, verse 9. It says that although Christ was rich, for our sake he became poor, so that through his poverty we might become rich. Jesus, the eternal Son, rich in glory, holiness, and in direct communion with the Father, steps into our poverty, into our brokenness, into our world. He entered our world and took on flesh, came in the mess and identified with the weak, the broken, the sinful, and the hurt. And at the cross, he gave his life completely for us, so that through his poverty, we could become rich. It's called the Great Exchange. He takes our mess, our shame, our pain, and our sin, and he dies on the cross and dies our death. And in return, he gives us his righteousness, his mercy, his peace, his eternal life. It's the Great Exchange. We could never have earned it, yet he gives it us. But the requirement is empty hands. You cannot receive it if your hands are full of posturing and positioning. And so the question is really, what are you carrying? What are you holding today? Are you full of pride? Are you full of shame? Are you full of performance? Are you full of fear? Are you full of something else? What is it that your hand is tightly gripping that is preventing the fullness of the kingdom of heaven in your life? What are you holding onto? You need to be honest in this perspective. You need to be honest in your understanding of this. You cannot lie to God, but you can hinder him from trying to hide from him. You cannot lie to him, but you can try to hide from him. Perhaps you have the issue of pride. Perhaps you need to be right, always look strong and appear to have the answer. Maybe it's shame. The belief that if God actually knew you, he wouldn't stick around for you. He'd move away. Can I tell you the truth? Jesus already knows. And he moved towards you, not away from you. Perhaps it's performance. You've been trying to earn what only God gives freely. Perhaps you're scared that if you stop holding it together, everything will fall apart. Maybe the obstacle is not your weakness, but it is your refusal to be honest before the Lord. Maybe that you know that you are poor in spirit, but you're not honest with God about it. And honesty is the door. But the good news of this Beatitude is it tells you today that you are allowed to put it all down. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. You don't have to hold on to this stuff. You don't have to hold on to the falseness. You don't have to hold on to the lie. You don't have to try and hide. You, like the tax collector, can come before Jesus and say, this is who I am. Stop the pretending. Stop the lying. And just be honest with God. You were never meant to come to God with full hands. You were never meant to just try and impress him. You were meant to come to the Lord of all creation, the author and the perfecter of our faith, the one who holds our very lives in his hands, who if he wanted to, the whole cosmos would fall apart and stop, the one who gave you breath and sustains your breath. You were meant to come to him with honesty, to say, Lord, I cannot save myself. I need your mercy. And as you approach him, as all those broken people did 2,000 years ago, Jesus says, blessed are the poor in spirit, for yours is the kingdom of heaven. And so I want us to move into a place where we open our hands to God, to respond to him, to come before him, because there is only true freedom in Jesus. All of those self-help books, all of those lovely tweets, all of those Instagram posts, none of it's going to save you. Only Jesus saves you. And I know it, right? I know it to be true, right? Because that's just my whole story of when I came to faith in Jesus was me trying to pretend like I had it all together whilst being an absolute mess. And if you're in that place today, there is no shame. Come talk to me. I would love to get you practical, proper help with that sort of stuff. But I would argue that for most of us today, the actual issue is our spiritual posturing. We know we're bankrupt. We know we're in a place where we don't read our Bible, where we don't follow Jesus. We know that we're hypocrites. We know that behind closed doors we're angry, and yet on Sunday we act like we're kind. We know there's all of this issue, right? We know there's all this problem. But we need to be honest with God about it. Because the truth is, he already knows. He already knows what's going on in your life. He already knows what it's like behind closed doors. He already knows about all the people that have hurt you. He already knows about all the things that have gone on. Yet he's looking at you and he's saying, are you trying to hide from me? Because if your hands are full of the things of this world, if it's full of your credentials and your achievements, if it's full of all your pretending, then you cannot receive the grace of Jesus, which is the kingdom of heaven. And so if you're in a place today where you know you want the kingdom of heaven, you know you want to see the fullness of God, you don't want to live the lives of the hypocrite Christians you've seen around you. You don't want to live the lies of the people that have been messy and broken. You want an actual moment with Jesus. Then I'd encourage you to change your posture. I'd encourage you to just open your hands up in front of you as an openness to God. To just say, Jesus, here I am right now. Right now, I have nothing before you. Right now, I am broken and messy. Right now, Lord, I need you to have mercy on me.